Intimacy did not die in my marriage all at once. It got sterilized first. Turned into something clinical, inconvenient, almost embarrassing to bring up. After a while, my wife made wanting closeness feel like I was handing her one more chore at the end of a long day. And the sickest part is, I believe that was all it was. Stress. Fatigue. Life. I believed it right up until the morning she got up before sunrise, put on perfume I hadn't smelled in over a year, and smiled at her phone like she was waking up for someone worth trying for. My name is Mason. I was 41 when I finally stopped calling it a rough patch. I'm a pipe fitter. Been doing it most of my adult life. Long hours, early mornings, sore back, busted knuckles, steel toe boots by the door. Nothing glamorous, but it paid well enough to keep a roof over our heads and a little backyard we used to sit in on summer nights with cheap drinks and no real plans. My wife, Erica, worked in office operations for a regional insurance company. Different worlds, basically. I came home smelling like dust, metal, and sweat. She came home smelling like copier paper, hand soap, and whatever candle was burning in the reception area that month. For a long time, that difference made us good for each other. I was steady. She was sharp. I was simple in the best ways. She knew how to smooth things out, talk through problems, make ordinary life feel more put together than it really was. We had been married 11 years. No kids. Just us, a two-bedroom house outside Fort Wayne, and the kind of life that used to feel small in a comforting way. There was a time when I could walk into the kitchen, come up behind her, kiss the side of her neck, and she would lean back into me without thinking. There was a time when she would reach for my hand in the truck without looking. There was a time when she laughed easy, touched my arm while talking, curled up against me on the couch like being near me was the most natural thing in the world. Then, somewhere along the line, everything between us got flat. At first I thought it was temporary. She had a rough quarter at work. Then another. A new department lead came in and started reorganizing everything. Erica complained about deadlines, pointless meetings, dumb office politics, people who created problems and then acted like she was supposed to fix them. I listened. I nodded. I told her it would settle down. She said maybe. Around then, she started getting colder at home, but not in a way I could easily fight with. It wasn't like she came in one day and announced she was done with me. That would have been too honest. Instead, she started giving me these short, efficient rejections that made me feel stupid for even trying. If I kissed her and let it linger a second too long, she would pull back and say she was tired. If I put my hand on her waist while she was rinsing a plate, she would shift away and say she wasn't in the mood. If I tried to talk at night, really talk, not just about bills or errands, she would sigh like I had picked the worst possible moment and say she didn't have the energy for a heavy conversation. After a while, even small affection started feeling risky. That was what wore me down more than the sex ever did. It wasn't just that we stopped sleeping together regularly. It was that everything soft disappeared with it. The little casual touches. The unplanned closeness. The sense that I was still a man she wanted near her. She started acting like intimacy itself was a task she had no time for. That phrase never came out exactly like that, not at first. It showed up in pieces. She said it felt like pressure. She said she hated feeling like there was always an expectation hanging over the night. She said sometimes she just wanted to come home and not have anyone need anything from her. The way she framed it, wanting affection from your wife after over a decade together made you sound selfish. Like you were asking her to clock into a second job. So I backed off. Not because I stopped wanting her. Because I got tired of feeling like some needy idiot every time I tried to reconnect with my own wife. I started giving her more space. I cooked more often. Took over groceries most weeks. Cleaned up after dinner before she had to ask. I told myself this was what marriage required sometimes. One person carries a little more when the other one is buried. I figured if I made life easier, maybe she would relax. Maybe whatever had closed in her would open back up. Instead, she got more distant. The way she talked to me changed first. Her voice lost all warmth unless she needed something practical. Then came the expressions. Irritation where there used to be patience. That looked like I was always half a step away from bothering her. Even when I was trying to help, I got the feeling she was bracing for me rather than happy to see me. Dinner became quieter. Weekends got weird. We were together constantly and connected almost never. If anyone had asked, I probably would have said we were just in a rut. Every marriage hits ugly stretches. That is what I told myself. I told myself routines harden. Attraction cools. Stress changes people. I told myself all of that because the alternative was harder to sit with. Then Erica started dressing differently. At first it was subtle enough that I felt ridiculous even noticing. A new blouse here and there. Better shoes for work. Jewelry she had not worn in forever. Then perfume. That got me because Erica had never been much of a perfume person. She used to wear it once in a while when we went somewhere nice, but even then it was light. Now I would catch it on random weekdays when she said she had a team dinner or some after-hours thing with people from the office. That was the word she kept using. Team. Team dinner. Team drinks. Team recognition thing. Team birthday. Funny how teams need so much evening attention when your marriage is dying in the next room. The first few times, I ignored it. I even told myself it was a good sign. Maybe she was feeling more like herself. Maybe taking care of how she looked meant she was coming out of whatever stress hole she had been in. But that hopeful explanation got harder to hold on to because none of that effort ever showed up for us. Not for date nights, because those had basically stopped. Not for weekends together, because there was always some reason she was too tired, too distracted, too not in the mood. Not even for little things. A dinner out, a movie, a drive, a drink on the back patio. If it involved me, she wore old leggings, tied her hair up, and acted like being perceived at all was exhausting. If it involved work, suddenly she cared again. She stood in front of the mirror longer. She changed earrings. She sprayed perfume behind her ears. She checked herself in the hallway mirror before grabbing her keys. I noticed because I remembered when she used to do those things before she went out with me. One night, maybe 4 months before everything finally broke open, she came downstairs in a dark green dress I had not seen since a wedding we went to years earlier. Not fancy, but fitted in a way that made it clear she knew she looked good in it. I was sitting on the couch when she walked in, and for a second I just stared. She asked what. I said nothing. Just that she looked nice. She shrugged and said it was only a work dinner. Only a work dinner. That line stayed with me because of how fast she dismissed it. Like I was strange for noticing my own wife looked better than she had looked for me in over a year. I asked where they were going. She named a steakhouse downtown that was a little nicer than anywhere we had been together in months. Then she checked her phone and said she was already running late. I asked who all was going, trying to make it sound casual. She listed a few women from her office, then 1 or 2 guys, all in that tossed-off tone people use when they do not want follow-up questions. I remember one name because it came up a few times over the next couple months. Ryan. At the time, it did not mean anything to me. It was just another office name in a sea of office names. But later, I would remember exactly how she said it. Too naturally. Too ready. That night she came home close to 11 smelling like perfume and restaurant air and something lighter underneath it. She was in a better mood than she had been with me in weeks. Not affectionate. Not suddenly transformed. Just looser. Brighter. Like some part of her had gotten fed. I made the mistake of trying to ride that mood. I asked if she had a good time and reached for her when she passed by the couch. She stiffened instantly. Then she gave me the tired look and said it was late. Just like that. Door shut. That became the pattern. Some nights she came home from these work things looking more alive than she ever looked in this house. Then the minute I reached for her, physically or emotionally, she went flat again. It was like the best version of her kept appearing somewhere I was not invited, and by the time she got home, all I got was whatever remained. Still, I kept trying not to be paranoid. You can talk yourself out of anything when you are invested enough. I told myself office jobs were social in ways mine wasn't. I told myself maybe dressing up gave her confidence. I told myself maybe the distance between us had nothing to do with another person and everything to do with time, resentment, routine, and 2 people quietly failing each other. That explanation hurt, but it was still better than picturing my wife saving her effort for someone else. Then came the excuses that started sounding rehearsed. She was too tired. Her head hurt. Work was insane. She felt bloated. She had an early morning. She did not want this turning into a thing. That last one got used a lot. If I looked disappointed, it was turning into a thing. If I tried to ask whether we were okay, it was turning into a thing. If I said I missed her, she would close off immediately like even that was unfair pressure. After enough of those nights, I stopped trying much at all. It is hard to explain how humiliating that is unless you have lived it. Sleeping beside your wife and feeling like a stranger should ask permission to exist in his own bed. Measuring every word. Wondering whether putting a hand on her hip will make her sigh. Starting to dread nighttime, not because you expect rejection, but because you know how casual it will be. One Friday in early October, I got home exhausted after a 12-hour day dealing with a miserable industrial repair. My shoulders were shot. My hands were filthy even after washing up. Erica was already home, sitting at the kitchen counter with her laptop open and a glass of white wine beside it. She looked good in a way that caught me off guard. Not dressed up exactly, but put together. Hair done. Nails freshly painted. A faint floral smell in the air. I asked if she was going somewhere. She said no, just trying to feel a little more human lately. I remember nodding, like that made sense, but something about the answer sat wrong. Because she never seemed interested in feeling more human with me. Just more present everywhere else. That night, after we got into bed, I tried again. Nothing dramatic. I put my hand lightly on her side and kissed her shoulder. She let out a breath like I had interrupted her concentration and said she really did not have it in her tonight. No softness. No apology. Just efficient refusal. I rolled onto my back and stared at the ceiling. A minute later she added that intimacy had started to feel like one more obligation lately, and she hated that. That sentence sat in the dark between us. One more obligation. I do not know why that hit harder than the other excuses, but it did. Maybe because it stripped away even the pretense that this was temporary. Maybe because I heard what was underneath it. Being close to me was not just tiring to her now. It was work. I did not say anything after that. She turned away, pulled the blanket up, and within minutes she was breathing like sleep had found her easily. I stayed awake a long time, staring into the dark, feeling like I was lying beside someone who had quietly replaced me with resentment. Then came the next morning. That was the moment something in me finally cracked. I woke up before 6 because I heard movement in the bathroom. That was unusual enough to get my attention immediately. Erica never got up that early on a Saturday unless she absolutely had to. Usually she slept in, or at least stayed in bed scrolling for a while. But that morning she was already up. I lay there for a second, listening. Drawer opening. Cabinet closing. The soft click of a makeup case. Water running. Then the unmistakable spray of perfume. I sat up slowly. When I walked into the bathroom doorway, she was standing at the mirror in a fitted cream sweater and dark jeans, doing her mascara with more care than I had seen in a very long time. Her phone was propped near the sink, screen lit up. She looked over at me fast, then reached for it and turned it face down almost instantly. That one little movement changed everything. She smiled, but it was too quick, too polished. Then she said she had forgotten to mention she was meeting a few people early for coffee before some office planning thing. On a Saturday. At 6 in the morning. I stood there, still half asleep, watching the woman who had rejected me less than 8 hours earlier suddenly look bright, awake, and almost eager to leave the house. And for the first time in over a year, I stopped feeling just unwanted. I started feeling played. After that Saturday morning, I could not go back to pretending I had imagined things. Before that, I still had places to hide in my own head. Stress. Timing. Miscommunication. A marriage going stale in normal, fixable ways. But there is something about seeing your wife reject you at night, then wake up before sunrise looking alert, careful, and quietly excited, that burns through every comforting lie at once. I stayed in that bathroom doorway for maybe 2 seconds after she gave me that line about coffee and office planning. Then I nodded like a fool and said okay. That was the part I hated most later. How normal I tried to act. She went right back to the mirror. I walked downstairs, started the coffee maker, and stood there with my hand on the counter while my heart thudded in this dull, angry way that felt less like panic and more like humiliation finally waking up. Upstairs, I could hear her moving around with purpose. Closet door. Hangers. Heel of her shoe against the hardwood. Little sounds that should have meant nothing and suddenly meant everything. When she came down, she looked better than she had for me in a long time. Not overdressed. That would have been easier to call out. It was more insulting than that because it was controlled. Intentional. Hair done just enough. Makeup light but careful. Perfume I had only been smelling on team nights. Her phone in her hand like it was part of her outfit. She grabbed her keys and travel mug and said she would not be long. I asked who all was meeting. Too fast, she said a few people from work. I asked where. She named a coffee place across town, one I knew for a fact did not even open that early on Saturdays. That was the first clean crack. Not proof. But a crack. I do not know if she realized her mistake right away. If she did, she covered it well. She just gave me a quick smile, said she might have the name wrong because she was still waking up, and left before I could ask anything else. I stood in the kitchen after the door shut, listening to her car back out of the driveway. Then I did something I had never done before. I went to the window and watched until she turned the corner. That moment changed something in me. Not because it was dramatic. Because it was pathetic. I knew it even while I was doing it. I was 41 years old, standing behind my own curtains like a suspicious neighbor, watching my wife leave the house in the dark after lying badly to my face. I hated what this was turning me into. I told myself not to chase her. Not to blow up my dignity over one suspicious morning. So I stayed home. I made coffee. Fed the dog. Tried to sit in the quiet like a normal person. But my head would not stop moving. That coffee shop. Her tone. The way she turned her phone face down the second I appeared. The fact that she had looked almost energized after months of acting like even talking to me was draining. By the time she got back around 9, I had already replayed it 100 times. She walked in carrying a paper cup from a completely different cafe than the one she had named. I noticed that before she even took off her coat. Maybe she noticed me noticing, because she held it up a little and said one place had been too packed, so they went somewhere else. Again, maybe that was true. That was the worst stage of it all. Everything had two versions. The one you could explain. And the one your gut heard immediately. I asked how the planning thing went. She said fine. I asked who was there. This time she gave me names slower, more carefully, like she was editing while she spoke. 3 women from work. Then Ryan. Just Ryan. Not one of the other guys she sometimes mentioned. Not a group that sounded messy and forgettable. Just one man's name placed neatly inside a list of women, like that would make it harmless. I nodded and let it go. But from that point on, I started noticing Ryan in places I had missed before. He was the one who had suggested the steakhouse for that team dinner. He was the one who apparently made everyone laugh in meetings. He was the one who had stayed late helping Erica finish reports 2 different nights. It was strange how often one man could exist inside harmless stories once I started tracking him. And the more I noticed him, the more I noticed Erica. Not just the clothes. The timing. She had no patience for me on weeknights, but suddenly had energy to straighten her hair on Thursdays. She could barely make it through dinner with me without looking checked out, but on the same nights she claimed she was exhausted, she would disappear into the bathroom with her phone for 20 minutes at a time. She stopped leaving it on the charger in the kitchen. Started taking it everywhere. Even just walking the laundry from one room to the next, phone in hand. Then there were the expressions. That was what got under my skin most because expressions are hard to argue with and impossible to forget. I would catch her looking at her phone with this faint private smile, then the second she realized I was nearby, her whole face would flatten. Not guilty. Just closed. Like I had interrupted a version of herself I was no longer allowed to see. One Tuesday night, I got home late and found her in the bedroom trying on blouses. That stopped me cold because Erica had not dressed with that kind of care for anything involving me in over a year. The bed was covered in rejects. A navy blouse draped over the corner. Black heels on the rug. Jewelry box open. She looked over at me and there was a beat too long before she smiled. She said she had forgotten to tell me there was another team dinner. I leaned against the door frame and asked where. Downtown again. I asked for what? She said a new regional manager was visiting and people were expected to show face. People. Expected. Everything with her had started sounding like HR language. So polished. So stripped of anything real. I said okay and went to shower. From the bathroom I could hear drawers opening and closing, hangers scraping the closet rod, the soft click of her perfume bottle. I stood under the water longer than I needed to, just thinking about how absurd it was that I could map her effort more clearly for strangers than for our marriage. When I came back out, she was standing at the mirror putting on lipstick. Lipstick. I cannot remember the last time she wore lipstick out with me. She caught me looking and said the office crowd was going somewhere nicer than expected. Then she glanced at her phone and smiled before she could stop herself. That tiny smile sat in my stomach all night. She came home after 10:30, smelling like perfume, cold air, and red wine. She was in a good mood for exactly 3 minutes. Then I asked if she had fun, and it was like a switch flipped. Her shoulders tightened. Her answers got short. She said she was tired and needed to wash her face. I followed her halfway down the hall and almost said it right there. Not an accusation. Just the truth. You look more alive leaving this house for work people than you ever do being here with me. But I did not say it. Maybe because I knew she would deny the part that mattered and turn the rest into me being insecure. Maybe because I still wanted one clean thing before I blew up 11 years of marriage. Or maybe because I was not ready to hear her lie calmly while I stared at her. So I waited. That Friday, she rejected me again. It was not even a real attempt. I was brushing my teeth, she was folding laundry on the bed, and I just came up behind her and put my hands lightly on her waist. Something simple. Familiar. The kind of touch married people should not have to strategize. She went stiff immediately. Then she peeled my hands off and said, in this flat tired voice, that she really did not have the bandwidth for that kind of thing tonight. Bandwidth? I looked at her and almost laughed because that was how office emails talked, not wives. Everything between us had become technical. Sterile. Managed. I asked whether it was always going to be like this now. She sighed hard and said she did not want another heavy conversation. That answer told me two things at once. First, she knew exactly what she was doing to me. Second, she did not care enough to stop doing it. I slept maybe 3 hours that night. The next morning, I was up before her for once. I was sitting at the kitchen table with black coffee when she came downstairs in leggings and an oversized sweatshirt, hair a mess, still looking half asleep. For 1 second I felt stupid all over again. Maybe I had built a whole case out of perfume and weird timing. Maybe she really was just tired and irritated and bad at being married right now. Maybe I was the one rotting everything by staring too hard at the cracks. Then her phone buzzed on the counter. She moved fast. Too fast. She picked it up, checked the screen, and something changed in her face. Not a smile exactly. Something lighter. Sharper. Awake. Then she looked up and saw me watching. That expression vanished so fast it made my chest tighten. She turned the screen away and said she had forgotten she promised to stop by the office for an hour. On Saturday. Again. I asked what for. She said some reports had to be finished before Monday. I asked whether anyone else was going in. She hesitated. Just for a second. Then she said Ryan might be there. There it was. Not proof. Not yet. But something in the way she said his name made the whole room feel smaller. Like I had finally stepped close enough to the truth to feel its heat. She left 20 minutes later dressed nicer than any woman heading in for weekend paperwork had a reason to be. And when the front door closed behind her, I did not feel confused anymore. I felt done pretending this was only distance. I just had not figured out yet how much worse it really was. After that second Saturday, I stopped trying to calm myself down. That had been my pattern for too long. Notice something strange. Feel sick about it. Then spend the next 6 hours building innocent explanations because the truth felt too humiliating to hold. But once Ryan's name started attaching itself to her best moods, her best clothes, her sudden urgency to leave the house, I could not keep doing that to myself. I did not become some genius investigator overnight. I became a man who finally started looking straight at his own life. The first thing I did was stop reacting in real time. That mattered more than anything. Before, every suspicious moment hit me like a punch, and I would either go quiet or ask a clumsy question too early. Now I started storing things. Times. Names. Patterns. What she wore. When she smiled at her phone. Which nights she seemed dead inside with me and which mornings she somehow woke up glowing. And once I started doing that, a shape emerged fast. Ryan was not just one co-worker among many. He was the thread. If Erica had a team dinner, he was there. If she had to stop by the office on a weekend, he might be there. If she came home in a better mood than she left in, his name had usually floated through the day somewhere. Not always. She was too careful for that. But enough. Enough that I started hearing his name before she even said it. That was a sick feeling. Knowing another man had entered your marriage before you could prove it. A few nights later, I got my first real opening. Erica had gone upstairs early, saying she needed a shower and wanted a quiet night. That was normal now. Almost everything ended with her wanting quiet, space, darkness, no pressure, no conversation, no touch. I was in the kitchen rinsing out my coffee mug when I noticed her phone on the table by the door. She never forgot it anymore. I just stood there staring at it. I knew what kind of man I had become in that moment. Or maybe what kind of man she had forced me to become. I hated both versions. But hatred does not stop your hand once your pride has been bleeding long enough. I walked over. The screen lit up from a notification before I even touched it. It was a message preview. From Ryan. Not explicit. That would have been too easy. Too clean. It said he was still thinking about this morning. That was it. One line. But it hit harder than anything graphic could have, because of how much it implied. This morning. Not work. Not reports. Not schedules. Something to think about. Something private enough to reference without naming. My stomach dropped so fast I had to grip the edge of the table. By the time I opened the screen, the preview was gone. Locked. Face recognition. No way in. I put the phone back exactly where I found it and stood there breathing like I had run somewhere. This morning. That was all I could hear. When Erica came downstairs 20 minutes later in a sweatshirt and damp hair, she looked tired again. Flat again. Like always. She picked up her phone, checked it, and for the smallest second, I saw the softness cross her face before she shut it down. Then she looked at me and asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. That word almost made me laugh. After that, I stopped needing proof that something was wrong. Now I needed proof of how wrong. I started noticing her schedule more carefully than my own. I knew when she normally left, when she usually got home, what kind of excuses she used on days she ran late. I also started remembering old moments differently. That green dress. The steakhouse. The early coffees. The Saturday office drop-ins. Her better mood after certain nights. Her colder mood after others. It all started arranging itself in my head like pieces that had been there the whole time, waiting for me to stop lying. Then one Thursday, something happened that pushed me over the edge. I got off work early because a site inspection was moved. I did not text her. I just drove home. Her car was in the driveway. The house was quiet when I came in, but I could hear movement upstairs. Not heavy movement. Quick movement. Dresser drawers. Hangers. Closet door. I headed up and found Erica in our bedroom changing. She turned too fast when she saw me. Again, not guilt exactly. Shock. Like I had stepped into a version of the evening she thought would stay hidden. On the bed was a navy dress, black heels, and two different pairs of earrings laid out side by side. She recovered quickly and said a few people from work had decided to grab drinks after a long week. It was Thursday. Barely 6. I looked at the room, then at her face, and what struck me was not that she was going out. It was the effort. The choosing. The care. The fact that she had more intention getting ready for a few people from work than she had shown toward our marriage in over a year. I asked who was going. She named 3 people. Ryan was one of them. That night she came home after 10:30. I was still awake on the couch. She stepped inside smelling like perfume and wine and city air. Her face was loose in a way I had not seen around me in months. Not drunk. Just warm. Fed by something. She saw me and the whole expression disappeared. That was when I knew. Not because I had caught her doing anything physical. Because no one switches that fast unless they are carrying 2 separate versions of themselves. The next morning, I called in late to work for the first time in years. I sat in my truck outside the office building where Erica worked. I told myself I was only there to settle my head. To make sure I was not spiraling into something ugly without reason. But deep down, I think I already knew I was not there to calm down. I was there to finally see my humiliation in daylight. Employees started pulling in around 8. I saw Erica's car. Then, a few minutes later, a silver SUV parked 3 rows over. A man got out. Mid-40s maybe. Office clothes, expensive haircut, relaxed posture. He looked like the type of man who knew exactly how to move through a room without seeming like he was trying. I watched Erica step out of her car at the same time. She did not see me. She did see him. And the change in her nearly broke me. Not because she ran to him. She did not. Not because they touched. They did not. It was smaller than that, which somehow made it more intimate. Her whole face opened. She smiled before she had even reached the building. He said something I could not hear, and she lowered her head in that way people do when they are trying and failing to hide pleasure. Then they walked in together. Not close enough for outsiders to notice. Close enough for me. I sat there gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers hurt. That was the moment the story inside my head changed. Before, I thought maybe I was trying to prove cheating. Now I understood I was looking at something crueler than sex. I was looking at preference. She had a version of herself she still wanted to give. I just was not the one receiving it. That night, I did something I had never done in 11 years of marriage. I went through her purse. I am not proud of it. But pride had become this useless, expensive thing I could no longer afford. Inside I found receipts, lip balm, gum, a compact, and a folded receipt from a restaurant downtown. 2 entrees. 2 glasses of wine. A Thursday night. No team. No office crowd. No harmless group excuse. Just 2 people, eating somewhere nicer than anywhere she had wanted to go with me in months. I sat at the kitchen table with that receipt in my hand for a long time. That little strip of paper did not just confirm betrayal. It confirmed effort. Planning. Choice. She had not simply drifted from me. She had redirected herself. Her energy. Her attention. Her best moods. Her body, maybe. But even before I could prove that part, I knew the deeper injury already. She had been giving another man the version of herself she made me feel guilty for missing. And once I knew that, I also knew something worse. I was very close to finding out just how far it had gone. I did not confront Erica the night I found the restaurant receipt. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. I wanted to walk upstairs, hold that little strip of paper in front of her face, and watch her try to explain how a work drinks night turned into 2 entrees and 2 glasses of wine at a place we had not been together in over a year. But by then I understood something important. If I confronted her too early, she would do what she had been doing for months. Shrink the truth. Manage it. Feed me the safest version first and wait to see what I could prove. So I stayed quiet. That receipt sat in my truck the next day folded in my wallet like a blade. I went to work. Turned wrenches. Checked lines. Answered questions. Did every part of my job on autopilot while the real work was happening somewhere underneath it. I was building the nerve to stop living half inside denial. Because by then, the pain was not in wondering anymore. It was in knowing enough to see the outline and still having to walk around like a man whose life was normal. Erica texted me around noon asking if I could pick up dry cleaning on the way home. That almost made me laugh. There is something surreal about betrayal continuing right beside domestic routine. Someone can be lying to your face, dressing for another man, hiding whole parts of their life from you, and still ask you to grab hangers and shirts on the way home like the marriage is just moving through another ordinary Thursday. I answered okay. That evening she acted exactly like she always did. Tired. Slightly distracted. Polite in a way that felt colder than anger. She reheated leftovers, stood at the counter instead of sitting down with me, then said she might go take a bath because she had a headache. I looked at her while she said it. This woman had become impossible to recognize in private and easy to admire in public. That contrast was eating me alive. So I made a decision. The next time she went out with a team, I was going to stop guessing. I did not have to wait long. 2 nights later, on Saturday, she said there was a last-minute dinner for a visiting executive. Casual, but she wanted to make a good impression. She said it like she was almost annoyed by the inconvenience, but I had seen enough by then to know her tells. The careful makeup. The good jeans. The cream blouse. The perfume. The way she checked her phone twice while talking to me and tried to hide the fact that she was checking it at all. I asked where they were going. She named a restaurant downtown. I nodded, waited 10 minutes after she left, then got in my truck. The whole drive there, I kept hoping I was about to prove myself stupid. That I would pull into the lot, see 3 or 4 co-workers already inside, maybe a couple women from her department, and feel that awful mixture of relief and shame that comes when your worst suspicion turns out to be your own damage talking. Instead, I parked across the street and saw Erica through the front window. She was already seated. Across from one man. Ryan. No group. No executive. No harmless office thing with too much wine and bad small talk. Just the 2 of them at a corner table, leaning in slightly, lit by soft restaurant light like they were the kind of people who had every right to be there together. For a few seconds, I honestly could not move. I had pictured that moment in a dozen different ways, but none of them prepared me for how normal it looked. No secretive touching. No movie scene kiss across the table. Just comfort. Familiarity. A private ease I had not seen from Erica in so long that it felt obscene watching her give it to him like it cost her nothing. She laughed at something he said. That laugh nearly finished me. Because it was the same laugh I had spent over a year trying to get back with patience, with effort, with understanding, with silence, with everything a husband tells himself love is supposed to look like when marriage gets hard. And there it was, alive and easy, just not for me. I do not know how long I sat there. Maybe 5 minutes. Maybe 15. Long enough to see Ryan reach across the table and touch her hand. Long enough to see Erica leave her hand there. That was all I needed. I went home before they ever left the restaurant. By the time she walked through the front door a little after 10, I was sitting in the living room with the receipt on the coffee table in front of me and every light in the house turned on. She froze when she saw me. Not dramatically. Just enough. Then her eyes dropped to the receipt. And in that second, all the little denials I had imagined hearing died before they could even form. She set down her purse slowly and asked what was going on. I looked at her and almost admired the nerve of the question. I said I had seen her with Ryan. At the restaurant. Just the 2 of them. Her face changed in layers. First surprise. Then calculation. Then something flatter. Something tired. Like she had reached the end of a long balancing act and knew there was no point pretending anymore. She sat down across from me without taking off her coat. For a few seconds neither of us said anything. Then she said it was not as simple as it looked. I asked whether it was simple enough to explain why she had lied. She did not answer that. Instead, she started giving me the version people give when they know the truth is ugly and hope complexity will make it feel less ugly. She said she and Ryan had gotten close over the last several months. That it started as talking. That he listened. That he made her feel seen at a time when everything in her life felt dull and heavy and routine. Routine. That word landed like an insult after 11 years. I asked whether it was physical. She looked away. That was answer enough, but I made her say it. She said yes. Quietly. No drama. No collapse. Just yes. I remember nodding once, like I was confirming a detail on a work order. Then I asked how long. She said a month physically. Longer emotionally. Longer emotionally. Somehow that hurt worse, even though I already knew it. I had lived beside the evidence of it for over a year. The coldness. The irritation. The way she saved herself for somewhere else. Hearing it out loud just stripped away the last scraps of denial. I asked if that was what all of this had been. The distance. The excuses. The way intimacy with me had suddenly become this burden she could barely tolerate. She started crying then, but it was not messy or loud. Just tears sliding down while she stared at the floor. She said she had not meant for it to happen like this. That sentence did something ugly to me. Because nothing happens like this by accident. Not the clothes. Not the lies. Not the weekends. Not the effort. Not the way she had looked me in the face night after night and acted like my need for closeness was the problem while she was giving her best self to another man. So I asked her the one thing I had been carrying the whole time. I asked if intimacy had really become a chore. Or if it had just become a chore with me. That made her cry harder. She said she did not know when things changed. She said somewhere along the way, being close to me started feeling heavy, and with Ryan it felt easy. Easy. There it was. The ugliest word in the whole story. Because of course it felt easy. He got the polished version. The chosen version. The version of her that still wore perfume and smiled at texts and woke up early with a reason. I got the exhausted version. The irritated version. The one she used to make me feel guilty for wanting more from. That was the real betrayal. Not just that she slept with him. That she let me spend over a year thinking love had simply dried up in her, when really she had been redirecting it. Managing me while feeding something else. Letting me live beside her like some harmless roommate while she gave another man the effort she treated like a burden at home. I told her I was done. She started talking fast then. Saying she was confused. Saying she had been unhappy for a long time and had not known how to say it. Saying Ryan had made her feel awake again. Saying she never meant to hurt me this much. I believed only one part of that. She had wanted to feel awake. She just had not cared what it cost me. I told her she could sleep in the guest room and start figuring out where she was going next. She asked if we could talk in the morning when emotions were lower. I said there was nothing left to clarify. She stayed in the guest room for 4 nights. On the 5th, she left to stay with her sister. After that, everything got practical fast. Lawyers. Bank accounts. Paperwork. Dividing a life into objects and percentages and signatures. She reached out more than once wanting to talk honestly now that the shock had settled. But honesty offered after exposure is not honesty. It is damage control with better wording. I never took her back. Last I heard, things with Ryan did not last. That part did not make me feel vindicated. It just felt predictable. Affairs are built on fantasy and escape. Real life crushes both eventually. What stayed with me was simpler. For a long time, I thought the deepest wound was being cheated on. It was not. The deepest wound was living beside someone who still had warmth, effort, desire, and softness to give, then being trained to believe I was selfish for noticing none of it reached me anymore. That was the part that took the longest to heal. Not losing her. Realizing how long I had been taught to accept the absence of things that should never have been missing in the first place.